dear friends and colleagues. I see many faces here that I recognize, and I've had a privilege of working with them also. Let me first, at the outset, thank you for this introduction, which is read out for me. But most of it seems untrue to me also, but it is very nice to hear it. The only issue is that I might have to live up to it. Keynote address is, I think, quite a difficult task, particularly when one is the first speaker and he is expected to begin the proceedings in a meaningful manner. Also, it is challenging when one realizes that one has to speak for about 30 to 40 minutes. This means that one should come prepared with a speech of about 3,000 words, which conveys sense and sets the ball rolling. I would like to thank the organizers for their persistence in ensuring that I come and offer you some of the convictions that I hold for conservation of built heritage and a bit of snippet on the World Heritage as well, which is the subject matter of this workshop. Now, heading the conservation program of the Archaeological Survey of India, it has given me ample opportunities to understand how this organization is managing to ensure the protection of all nationally important or protected monuments, 3697 in number as of now, including 24 World Heritage properties, and that they are kept in a good state of preservation. It's not an easy task, considering the resources, which is human and financial, at disposal, the geographic spread, and the rising expectations of communities that claim to be directly or indirectly associated with these monuments. With the bulging middle class of this country traveling like never before, and the direct or indirect economic benefits that most monuments offer, it is indeed a challenge to ensure the upkeep and presentability of a monument and to meet the expectations of the visitors. ASI, being the custodian of all nationally important monuments, is therefore raising its bar to meet the expectations of all domestic and international visitors who travel great distances and visit these premium sites with great enthusiasm, and we cannot afford to let them down. The monuments and sites should be well preserved, well presented, and should offer authentic information to a visitor, and this is a challenge that we all have to address for times to come. But perhaps at this juncture, there might be a sense of unease amongst all gathered here in trying to understand what I just outlined here. Is it relevant to conservation? Should we instead not focus on policies or principles or techniques instead of talking about managing tourism at sites? Should that indeed be ASI or State Department of Archaeology's concern? Or should there be some other department or agency which should look after these aspects? Well, it is here that I would like to offer my viewpoint, which at the outside I would like to clarify are more of an individual's views than that of an organization that I represent. However, I have no hesitation to admit that my views are heavily influenced by the initiatives that have been taken by the ASI in recent times. Now, in order to understand conservation of monuments, it is important to look back in time, as it is important to think what possibly lies ahead of us. We all credit John Herbert Marshall, the longest serving Director General of the ASI, for his immense contribution to archaeology and conservation. He is believed to be, and perhaps rightly so, be a pioneer in many ways. His Conservation Manual of 1923 is believed to be a magnum opus of ASI's conservators who still refer to it with an unprecedented ownership and pride. It laid foundation for the principles and approach to conservation while assigning role and responsibility of an archaeological officer, drawing up of inspection notes, comprehensive architectural and photographic documentation, decision-making in conservation on value-based judgment, and detailed technical specification for various building elements and kinds of interventions are all credited to him. Marty Wheeler, on the other hand, was more intuitive perhaps. He envisioned conservation engineers, scientists, and horticulturists to work together with archaeologists within the fold of the organization and provide conservation solutions that were sensitive to archaeological concerns. He lasted briefly in this organization, but his interventions have proved prophetic and visionary with time. He emphasized a multidisciplinary approach to conservation, unlike his predecessor, who merely handed over the task to PWD or military engineers. Well, it is unfortunate that we don't have much records available for the conservation carried out during his period, well, for the facts well known to us. India emerged out of the shackles of the British Dominion in 1947, and events thereafter also had a great impact on archaeological or conservation pursuits. After independence, the next 3 decades also witnessed various exemplary conservation works carried out in most trying circumstances all across the country. We keep hearing these eulogies and often remark that most of the monuments and sites perhaps might have disintegrated completely into oblivion had ASI not intervened at that point in time appropriately. With very meager budgets and enthusiastic zeal, the monuments were preserved or restored to bring back to life and maintain thereafter for posterity. And there are examples after examples of them. Whether you look at Ajanta and Ellora caves, whether you look at Hampi group of monuments, or you look at the shore temple of Mahabalipuram, you look at the Sun temple Konark, or you, for that matter, look at the Taj Mahal, the Brideshwara. I can give you example after example, the Rani Ki Vav at Patan, the Sanchi Stupa, the Nalanda Sanchi Stupa, the Nalanda Mahavihar, the Mahabodhi temple of Bodh Gaya, Alampur group of temples which was completely translocated from one location to the other. There are countless such monuments where that were appropriately intervened that has led to their safeguarding today. While ASI is often unjustly criticized without knowing what all challenges it faces, it should be profusely thanked for its continuing painstaking efforts and for ensuring that we all are enjoying our visit to these monuments as well as are being educated for various facets of lives and events they represent. Many of my colleagues who are present here and those who have served and are serving, and all the professionals who are passionate about heritage, and I see many of you here, and wish to dedicate themselves to the cause of safeguarding monuments, I only wish to tell them that this is such a noble pursuit that they must relentlessly pursue. These ruins will thank you one day and pay homage in unprecedented ways. At this juncture, it is also important to mention, albeit briefly, ASI's huge role in preserving monuments in South and Southeast Asia. Conservation of Bamia Buddhas in Afghanistan, Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and thereafter, as of now, we are working in 5 or 6 countries, including the Taprom Temple at Cambodia that you're seeing the image of, the Wat Pho Temple at Laos, this is Wat Pho Temple, the Mison group of temples in Vietnam, Ananda Temple in Bagan, Myanmar. They have all received international acclaim. Most of these works carried out under the lens of international peer-reviewed ad hoc experts of UNESCO-appointed committees have appreciated ASI's methodologies and results after successful intervention. Now, at this juncture, I would like to touch, as my friend Tejas also pointed out, I'll briefly touch upon ASI's on conservation policy, which is the national policy for the conservation of ancient monuments, archaeological sites, and remains. Now, this was framed out of discussions and deliberations that lasted for more than 2 years. Well, I was fortunate to be personally involved in this endeavor and be a part of the team that led to the drafting of this policy more than 90 years after the Conservation Manual was published. Well, it is often loosely remarked that the last 2 centuries have seen a shift from the era of archaeology in the 19th century to conservation in the 20th century, and now that we are in the 21st century, it is an era of management. Well, this shouldn't stir any controversy or doubt when I say this, because all these activities are also ongoing and are parallel. However, I'm merely pointing out on shifts that are taking place on account of changing perception and expanding definition of heritage and monuments, which is also being understood beyond being edifices in isolation to their connection with their immediate and sometimes regional context. This 15-article national policy for conservation, which is spread over 110 sub-articles, does not disregard or discard the previous understanding of conservation that ASI had, but it builds on it. It respects the legacy of all past interventions and attempts to imbibe contemporary practices that have a worldwide attribution. It pledges intervention, viewing monuments as national treasures, which is mentioned in Article 1 of this policy, that have transcended their original intended function. and thus must be preserved to behold the values that they represent. In fact, most of the times we are talking about conservation, it is on the basis of the value-based judgment that we have. Now, this new policy, which is already around 10 years old, encourages documentation, conservation planning, and multidisciplinary inputs for a holistic understanding and solution, where it seems to have stood the test of time. Well, it's impossible to present in detail all the articles of the policy in such a short span of time that I have, and I would urge you all to download it from the ASI's website for perusal. And of course, I'll be available for discussion at least today if at all it is required. Often it is asked, what is this new policy offering and how does it respond to contemporary situations? The answer isn't simple, but at this juncture it can only be said that the policy presents technical definitions and approaches as well as managerial concerns such as managing tourism, disaster management, design interventions within the monument precinct, community concerns, capacity building, illumination, etc., to name a few. The policy is envisioned as a dynamic document to be reviewed once every 5 years, to be updated if necessary to imbibe any contemporary concerns for conservation and management of a monument or an archaeological site. I take great pride in informing this gathering that the policy has been implemented in letter and spirit by the archaeological officers, and results are for everyone to see. Honorable Supreme Court led preparation of the site management plan of Taj Mahal, the management plans for various monuments on the World Heritage List, interventions of late in the Red Fort. We had massive program inside Red Fort where nearly 100 crores were spent on one monument alone. Current improvements of all World Heritage monuments by improving various amenities and presentation, apart from their all-inclusive conservation solutions, which is such structural, scientific, or environmental, is an attestation to the successful implementation of this policy. And maybe my colleagues who are present here from ASI may, when their turn come and they talk about the conservation of monuments, may also highlight this further. And it is heartening to note that many state departments of archaeology have also accepted this policy and are adapting it to suit their requirements. And perhaps this is what Tejas was also trying to point out, that it is high time that the state government of Maharashtra or Maharashtra State Archaeology should also have a policy of its own for the conservation of monuments, because perhaps the need and the context here is slightly different from other monuments. Now, while I have read out 4 pages worth of praise, the challenges are also there, and they're enormous, and I must briefly mention them as well. Now, India, unlike many countries, is fortunate to have such a strong central and state government support, as they just pointed out that he has now a very generous support of 100 crores, which has increased from a few thousand a couple of decades back. Unlike many countries wherein business models have to be created to preserve and present their heritage. While on one account, the budgets being offered are getting more and more generous, and ASI only, I remember in 2010 or 11, the budget used to be for about 110, 120 crores, and today we are touching about 450 crores. Human resources within the folds of the organization, alas, is not catching up. So many conservation and development works are therefore being outsourced to ensure that the budgets are timely spent. The challenges are both intrinsic and extrinsic, almost like a chicken and an egg solution. Often there is a pressure from all walks of lives who wish the monuments to be presented and utilized in ways that archaeologists, conservationists, heritage enthusiasts at times find it unacceptable. Of late, putting monuments to a, well, quote-unquote, compatible and sympathetic reuse for their commercial exploitation is also being debated. Needless to say that the huge number of people visiting a monument has only added to the pressure that has a telling impact on a monument. Hence, there is a dire need to work out the carrying capacity models to safeguard their fabric. And this is happening. I'll give you one example. The classic example of Taj Mahal that invites on certain days of extended weekends more than 75,000 visitors a day, which worries the ASI about the consequences that it has on the physical and social manifestations. And this problem is not only here, but it is world over the problem we can see. And we all know the cases in Italy, Spain, etc., where the protests by local visitors have begun, and they have begun restricting the numbers. Certain cave sites in Europe, such as prehistoric sites and decorated caves of Vézère Valley in France or Altamira in northern Spain, they are disallowing almost completely a casual visitor, and they only allow a researcher. There are also concerns about unsympathetic development that happens around or sometimes within a monument, and the development pressure that you can see, the communities that have begun asserting their quote-unquote right ownership and restart a function, or sometimes the unfortunate acts of vandalism. All these need our focused attention unlike ever before. Now, at this juncture, I can't but speak about World Heritage. Now let us speak briefly, switch over to World Heritage Convention 1972. India is in an unprecedented frenzy to catch up. Last 12 years that I've been associated with the World Heritage movement, as ASI is also the nodal agency for World Heritage Matters, has seen our number of World Heritage properties increase from 27 to 42. It on one hand seems a huge achievement, but on the other makes us realize that we have a long way to go. We are the 6th on the World Heritage list, and catching up with the first 5 will take quite some time. India is vocal globally for World Heritage Matters, as we are enjoying the 4th term as the World Heritage Committee member, wherein we are keenly campaigning for issues such as reducing the gap between different regions. In fact, I was having this discussion just before we came over on the dais with a colleague. Adequate representation of the World Heritage properties from all regions, with special focus on African, LDC, and SIDS nation. LDC is least developed countries, and SIDS is small island development states. Capacity building enhancement and providing technical support to the countries. India, on the other hand, is also looking at solutions to enhance the extra budgetary provisions for the World Heritage, simplification of the operational guidelines, in particularly the newly introduced step of preliminary assessment, and returning to a pre-2017 scenario to be able to submit at least 2 nomination dossiers in a year. All these matters also require a lot of international support, and India is trying to relentlessly pursue these matters at UNESCO. I'm also very excited to share and inform here that India will host the 46th session of the World Heritage Committee in July this year. India has never hosted this meeting earlier. This will help us showcase India's soft power to a global audience in a big way. The meeting is expected to be attended by nearly 2,000 delegates comprising UNESCO officials, the World Heritage Center officials, the World Heritage Committee, the 3 advisory bodies, the representatives of nearly 195 countries. They are all signatory to this convention, including diplomats, officials, experts, observers, international NGOs, media, and of course our own Indian officials, professionals, etc. We hope to make some big announcements during this committee meeting. And apart from the committee meeting, India will be also organizing 2 different fora. One is the Young Professionals Forum, and the second is Site Managers Forum, besides organizing a range of other events and activities and possibly exhibitions. In India, it is encouraging to note that a partnership with many state governments who are also catching up on the World Heritage front. Many state governments have taken initiatives to push and promote the monuments and sites under their jurisdiction for the World Heritage tag, and in many ways, it is the ultimate recognition to a heritage asset. This, many believe, is a case of asset capitalization for tourism enhancement, employment generation, and various other community benefits. This also leads to an overall development for the benefit of locals. India receives, ASI being as I said, we are the nodal agency, we receive at least 4 to 5 nomination dossiers every year, and it is a huge task for my small team back in office to go through each of them and render our technical advice. It has always been our effort to ensure that a dossier is received is complete in all respects, has the necessary outstanding universal value, and has minimal conservation or management challenges. Well, in a way, no World Heritage property will ever be bereft of these issues or challenges, but what is to be seen is the commitment of the state and center alike to continue engaging with them to have at least pressure on any, least pressure on any World Heritage property. Well, this, in my opinion, putting a World Heritage site on the World Heritage list is far easier than to manage it after that. We think that if the site is on the list, our job is done, but actually our job starts thereafter. Well, here, let me emphasize or bring out the roles that the ASI and, in this case, the State Department of Archaeology can play together. Unlike before, any monument or site proposed for nomination has to ensure a management mechanism which is all-inclusive and brings all stakeholders on board. Earlier, if there was a monument was being proposed, ASI will put up a nomination. It used to be a 4-page nomination, and that was the end of it. No questions asked, nothing. But today the scenario is very different, and these are not merely the government officials that we are looking at or technical experts that we are looking at, but it is the communities, the panchayats, the local residents, the local representatives. Everyone is a stakeholder who are directly or indirectly associated with a monument. So the management framework proposed for any site must address also the 5 C's of UNESCO. I'm sure some of you would be aware of it: conservation, credibility, capacity building, communication, and communities. And they particularly lay emphasis on the communities. Now, when the ICOMOS inspection happens, and in this case also, if suppose one of the nominations from here goes, so ICOMOS will come and inspect it. So they would also be very keen to understand how communities have played a role in right from the preparation of the nomination dossiers to the decision-making process. And that's something that they are very keen to look at. And here, I think I'd like to give you 2 or 3 examples. For example, in 2015, I recall I was part of the team which went to Nalanda for its inspection. And I recall that the ICOMOS expert from Japan, one very sort of renowned professor who had come, and he was having a stakeholder consultation. Now, this was a hall as perhaps big as this, but of course in a round table manner, and about 30, 40 people were sitting. So I was sitting along with the ICOMOS official, and we were all having a discussion. And after about an hour of meeting, I recall this professor tells me that, you know, he has never seen a stakeholder consultation meeting like this, wherein the vice chancellor of a university and a rickshaw puller were all sitting on the same table. And he was very, very sort of enthused about this whole process of, you know, the democratic process of inclusivity. Recently, when we put up Maidams of Assam for inscription, again, it was very heartening to see the way communities came forward, the local community, in welcoming to the whole process of dialogue and discussion that took place with ICOMOS. And in certain cases, we would take a backseat, and they were the ones who were sort of guiding the whole process. And another example I can think of, well, that is still a work in progress, which is or Jinking Shri, the living root bridges of Meghalaya, wherein the dossier is being prepared by the locals, the village community. The management is all local village community. The maps are being prepared by the local village community. So everything is being done by the communities themselves. And definitely they're going to tick all the right boxes once their dossier goes. So in a nutshell, the argument that is being put forth here is that India is at an interesting inflection point vis-a-vis conservation and management of monuments. ASI is making all attempts to ensure that it responds to the contemporary concerns with the finesse that is expected of it. It realizes the challenges and expectations with equal aplomb. Well, this workshop, spread over 2 days, I hope deliberates on the technical aspects as much as it makes an attempt to steer the course of conservation and management in times to come. I compliment and thank the state government and the Department of Archaeology and Museums government of Maharashtra for the initiative in bringing all stalwarts on the platform so that we share our experiences and learn from our illustrious predecessors. Perhaps a more logical conclusion, and I would slightly disagree when they just pointed out that perhaps we shouldn't publish and simply the proceedings may go online. I think publication has its own old school charm. I hope you bring out these deliberations because so that people can read it thereafter. I regret not being here tomorrow, unfortunately, for I have to return to ensure that the dossiers for this year go in time. They are being scrutinized as of now, and it has to be sent to the ministry to decide India's nomination for this year. But I do hope that with all of you present here, you discuss these conservation issues and joint management mechanism and how it will be put into practice. And I'm here today at least so that if there is any discussion, at least today I can participate. We are all aware that Maharashtra is presenting 2 exciting dossiers. dossiers, but both have their own set of challenges. This gathering of professionals, including my colleagues from ASI, should be able to address many of these. Well, thank you very much for your patient listening. And if there are any questions or queries, I'm most happy to answer them.